Wow, what a weekend, guys. Power outages, down trees. I hope you guys are doing okay wherever you happen to be. Did you guys hear how bad the storms were?
Take a look at this. A tree has fallen on an apartment building on Queen Street Northeast. It also crushed several cars nearby. Fortunately, DC Fire and EMS tells us nobody was hurt. They are still working to evacuate the building. And some new video we are just getting in showing how powerful the winds are. Our crew was driving in North Bethesda when this tree fell down right in front of them.
But seriously, guys, how are you? Now, last I checked, thousands still didn't have power after those storms hit a lot of the areas. People in the DMV area are still dealing with the aftermath. There was even an incident involving the possible death of a Virginia man. And as you guys saw in the clip, the winds knocked down quite a few trees throughout the region. An apartment building on Queen Street Northeast, they had a close call when a tree fell. It damaged a lot of cars. Thankfully, no reported injuries. But unfortunately, in Dumfries, Virginia, a 43-year-old man lost his life when a tree fell on his home, and responders found him deceased inside. That is something that I've always been concerned about. Like whenever I've been in a house during a really heavy windstorm or very aggressive lightning and thunder, I've always been concerned about if a tree were to fall, would we survive? A tree fell right in North Bethesda near the Grand and the Wisconsin apartment complexes. Residents were without power for almost an entire day. And when they checked the day after, about 15,000 Dominion Energy customers and nearly 35,000 Pepco customers were still affected. This included extended power outages that impacted communication, medical device usage, access to water, and even food spoilage when grocery stores remained closed. They also warned people not to connect portable generators to your home's electrical system and never bring a generator indoors. Carbon monoxide from generators can be life-threatening and even fatal if it's not properly ventilated. Now, I hope you guys are keeping safe out there. Make sure to watch out for your families. Do you guys ever notice how power companies always switch people off when it's the most dangerous to life? It seems very questionable to me. Now, speaking of, I just want to go ahead and thank you guys so much for being a part of this financial freedom community here on YouTube. This means the world to me. Every time you light up the like button, definitely makes my day, and it gives me that extra oomph to make that next video. I appreciate that, you guys. So yeah, why not make it official, right? Go ahead and hit the subscribe button and also tap that notification bell. That way you can be a part of the 480,000 strong financial freedom fam. It's totally free, no expenses, no cost out of pocket, and it'll totally make my day. Thank you guys so much for that. But seriously, more power outage news. This time it's in New Jersey. Strong thunderstorms sparked thousands of outages in the area in homes and businesses. At one point, there was over 36,000 utility customers who were left without electricity across various locations in the state. The outages were scattered, stretching from Stillwater Township in Sussex County to Lacey Township in Ocean County, all the way to Egg Harbor Township in Atlantic County. Now, I think the bigger headline here is how often this has been happening lately. This was the third occurrence of strong thunderstorms within 5 days, prompting thunderstorm watches and warnings across the state. Forecasters from the National Weather Service, they predicted wind gusts of up to 60 to 70 miles per hour, which can easily bring down trees and power lines, especially when the soil's wet. Now, before this, they saw a 3-day heat wave that gripped most of New Jersey. During the heat wave, the combination of high temperatures and humidity have triggered a series of excessive heat warnings and heat advisories to ensure the safety of residents. Man, talk about roller coaster weather, right? Man, are they manipulating the weather patterns? I mean, because this is some really unusual behavior, if you ask me. Now, another one, more than 120,000 residents went without power after their own storms. And it says here, there were around 83,000 Ameren customers without service in Missouri and 43,000 in the state of Illinois. Severe storms from the west of St. Louis region, they packed lightning, rain, and winds up to 70 miles per hour. Was it the same in your area, guys? But seriously though, this brings to question the current state of the US energy grid to me. Did you guys hear about the PJM interconnection? The largest US electric grid operator in the US, and it says here that they're having trouble with the recent temperature spikes in the country. The PJM interconnected serves a massive area providing power to over 65 million people, spanning from Chicago to New York and down to Virginia and covering a significant portion of the East Coast. So here's the catch, guys. It's typically a net exporter of electricity electricity, supplying power to other regions as well, like New England and the Midwest. But with the recent weather that we've been having, with all the extreme heat and all, everybody's cranking up their ACs, putting an enormous strain on the grid. So now the PJM interconnection is facing a dilemma. They issued a maximum generation emergency load management alert for Thursday, which is an early notification that the conditions may need the operator's emergency procedures. Now, it also issued an energy emergency alert, also known as an EEA-1, to signal that all generating resources are already online or are scheduled to be online. They're calling up all power plants to run at full capacity, postponing maintenance and bringing offline plants back online to prevent brownouts. It's a real critical situation, and they need to ensure that there's enough power to keep everybody connected. But it's a very tough challenge with aging infrastructure and local grids not used to handling such demand. Now, if they cannot meet the demand, they may have to cut back on exporting power to neighborhood grids, causing potential blackouts there. Worst case scenario, if there's still not enough power, they may have to rotate power outages to balance the load. And trust me, that is something we do not want to experience. We'll be closely monitoring how the situation unfolds. PJM noticed that this year's forecasted summer peak demand for electricity is about 156,000 megawatts, which is higher than last year's peak demand of 149,000 megawatts. The PJM interconnection is projecting peak demand at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we hope their emergency response plan can keep everything running smoothly. If power usage exceeds projections or they encounter unexpected issues with power plants, things could get very challenging. Now, just imagine there are all those electric vehicles the government wants. The White House may very well have jumped the gun there, as we may not have enough power to support the shift that they're pushing. Y'all know what I mean, right? But hey, maybe we should vote to turn off the AC in all federal government buildings and Washington, D.C. What do you think? Now, another major electrical grid in trouble, Texas. Same thing, due to unusually hot summer weather. Now, if you're from Texas, I ain't got to tell you nothing. Record-breaking heat waves, so the demand for electricity has reached new highs. A lot of debate going on about the reliability of the power grid, and Texas is already the largest power user in the nation. Now, they're seeing a surge in electricity usage, partly due to its increasing dependence on intermittent renewable power sources like wind and solar. The Lone Star State's power grid operates independently from the Electric Reliability Council of Texas, which deliberately avoids federal oversight so that they can maintain their autonomy. But this self-reliance, it can make the grid even more vulnerable during extreme conditions, as Texas cannot depend on neighboring grids for support. Plus, Texas is transitioning to green energy sources, with almost 40% of its power coming from the renewable sources this year. And so this shift has its advantages, making Texas the largest clean energy market in the United States. But it also raises questions about grid stability during times of high demand. Summer 2023, it will mark the first time that all of Texas's energy needs cannot be met by traditional power plants like nuclear, coal, and gas. Now, in June, the state experienced a warning about low supplies from wind farms and unexpected closures of fossil fuel generators. So a lot of potential vulnerabilities in the power grid or the electrical grid. And fixing it, it's no easy task. See, Texas allows electricity prices to fluctuate based on supply and demand. And so this means high prices and high profits, and that drives the developments of new power plants. At times, spot power prices have been as low as $20 to $50 a megawatt hour versus the more than $4,000 during the periods of stress. But people saw the limitation of this pricing structure during 2021 during the winter blackouts. Since then, the state lawmakers have passed reforms that require weatherization of critical infrastructures and changed the rules to put more money in the pockets of the owners of power generation. And it's pretty much the same across the country. Extreme weather events and climate change definitely are not making things any easier. Changing the rules, building transmission lines, and connecting to neighboring states, these are long-term challenges. And there's a lot of debate among shareholders here. They got some ideas, kind of like using machine learning and fancy AI to predict demand and manage supply during rough times. And electric vehicles, they're all the rage right now, which means even more power demand. So what's the takeaway, you ask, right? Well, Texas is kind of like a testing ground for the rest of the country. Everyone is watching this one state to see how they're going to handle this energy challenge, especially as we try to make our grid greener and electrify everything, even our cars. We got some bright minds working on these solutions, but we got to find the balance between, what's working now and what's going to save our planet in the long run. You know what I mean? All right, so let's talk about the US electric grid and why it's not quite ready for the big energy transition. You know how we imagine it as this huge synchronized machine carrying electricity from power plants to our homes? Well, in reality, it's not quite that simple. So here's the deal, guys. There are 3 separate grids in the country, one in the West, one in the East, and one in Texas. And guess what? They don't connect that much and they don't share that much power between them. Plus, each grid has its own operators with different interests, making it very tough to build the long distance power lines needed to transport wind and solar energy nationwide. By the way, if you guys own a home, make sure your home is protected. Get your free home warranty quote. There's a link in the description down below of this video. Now, we got this awesome potential to harness wind and solar power, which it would be a cheap way to cut those emissions and also fight climate change, right? But the best spots for all that clean energy are often far from cities and the existing grid. To make it work, though, we would need thousands of miles of new high voltage transmission lines. Plus, there's this lack of planning. Now, unlike the federal government overseeing the interstate highway system, there's no single entity in charge of organizing the grid. Instead, it's really been pieced together over time by thousands of little independent entities and utility companies, ultimately building smaller grids for nearby customers. So we need those long distance lines to transfer clean energy from rural areas to cities. But building them is not as easy as fixing a pothole. They require approval from multiple regional authorities who often disagree on the need and, of course, the cost. So here's the real kicker. If we can't get this transmission thing sorted out, we might not meet our goal of 100% clean electricity by 2035. We got all these plans and funds to fight climate change, but without a stronger grid, we're going to be hitting some significant roadblocks. Already, many wind and solar projects are facing delays and higher costs due to the lack of transmission capacity. The existing power lines are clogged, and we end up using more expensive fossil fuel plants instead. It's not just about the environment, but it's also about reliability. Extreme weather events are happening more and more often, and we need the capacity to transfer power between regions. That way, if one area goes dark, then its neighbors can help out. The good news is that there are some efforts to fix this mess. The Biden administration, the White House, they have some money to fund projects or transmission projects, and Congress is giving the federal government more authority to override objections from state regulators for essential power lines. But of course, there's going to be resistance from utility companies and from politicians. They're worried about losing control or clashing with states' rights. So it's a big tug of war for everybody to get on board. Now, we could try to manage electricity a little bit better and use it when demand is low. Incentives to charge electric vehicles during off-peak hours or maybe turning off appliances during extreme weather, that could definitely help out. But even with those tricks, we still need a lot more transmission.